What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Nerdy Professor podcast, where we talk about everything black, bold, and beautiful. I'm your host, the Nerdy Professor, and on this episode, we're going to focus on the height of the Abolitionist movement and the strategies and tactics used during that time. Have y'all ever wondered why Abe Lincoln liked apples so much? Anyway, I have a quick question for y'all. Have y'all ever seen Death Note? Do y'all remember how Light was morally struggling in the beginning for like 2 seconds when he first got the Death Note? What if you had that power? What if you had the power to choose how someone lived or how something played out before they died? The abolitionist movement emerged as a powerful force against slavery, and it was a pivotal moment in United States history. The abolitionist movement was marked by passionate activism and unwavering dedication to justice. But at its forefront were African American abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, Dred Scott, and Harriet Tubman, whose voices and actions played a crucial role in challenging the institution of slavery. There were also allies in this movement like William Lloyd Garrison and Harriet Beecher Stowe, who also used their voices and platforms to advocate for the immediate abolition of slavery. That's important. The abolitionists saw slavery as a disease that plagued the North American continent and wanted it to stop by any means necessary. Abolitionists helped those in forced servitude escape by positioning themselves on the moral high ground and using petitioning, speaking to the public, and producing public publications, say that 10 times fast, to get the population on their side. Other abolitionists used more radical means to gain freedom for those enslaved, such as violence. Abolitionists used varying tactics and strategies to achieve their goals. They used direct and indirect action, but also violent and non-violent tactics in order to accomplish their God-given tasks. The abolitionists wholeheartedly believed that slavery was a sin and a crime against God. Despite laws forbidding the education of African Americans, they used education as a means of empowerment, as a means of resistance. Through education, they reclaimed their humanity and asserted their right to freedom and equality. Some enslaved individuals stealthily taught themselves and others to read and write, recognizing that knowledge was a powerful tool for liberation. People like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs. Frederick Douglass was born 1818 in Maryland. His exact birth date remains unknown, as enslaved people were often deprived of their basic records. He was an enslaved African American who escaped bondage and became one of the foremost abolitionist leaders and intellectuals of the 19th century. Despite being born into such harsh conditions and denied a formal education, Douglass taught himself to read and write, recognizing the transformative power of knowledge. He became a powerful orator and writer, captivating audiences with his eloquence and impassioned speeches condemning the evils of slavery. In 1845, Douglass published his most groundbreaking autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, which vividly depicted the brutality in slavery and became a bestseller in the United States and abroad. His narrative not only exposed the moral hypocrisy of slavery, but also challenged stereotypes about the intellectual capabilities of African Americans. Douglass went on to become a leading voice in the abolitionist movement, advocating for immediate emancipation and full civil rights for African Americans. He worked closely with prominent abolitionists such as William Lloyd Garrison, and later became a champion of women's suffrage alongside figures like Susan B. Anthony. After the Civil War, Douglass continued to fight for equality as a statesman, a diplomat, and advocate for African American rights during Reconstruction. His legacy as a tireless advocate for justice and equality continues to inspire generations, embodying the resilience and determination of those who dared to challenge the injustice of their time. As Frederick Douglass once said, "I expose slavery in this country because to expose it is to kill it." And indeed, the resistance of enslaved individuals played a crucial role in challenging the institution of slavery. Another prominent figure during this time was Harriet Jacobs. Born 1813 in Edenton, North Carolina, she was an enslaved African-American woman who became a prominent abolitionist and author. Jacobs endured horrific hardships during slavery, including sexual exploitation and separation from her children. Determined to escape her oppressors, Jacob hid for 7 years in a small attic crawl space, documenting her experience in her autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, originally published under the pseudonym Linda Brent in 1861. Her narrative exposed the unique struggles faced by enslaved women, shedding light on the intersection of race, gender, and slavery. Jacob's memoir not only provided a rare first-hand account of the brutality and dehumanization of slavery, but also challenged prevailing stereotypes and misconceptions about African-American women. Her courageous act of publishing her story contributed to the abolitionist cause and inspired empathy and support for the plight of the enslaved individuals. After gaining her freedom during the Civil War, Jacobs continued her advocacy for social justice, supporting efforts to educate formerly enslaved individuals and promote women's rights. Her life and writings continue to resonate today as a testament to the strength and resilience and unwavering determination for those who fought against the injustice of slavery. So in Death Note, Light uses manipulation and propaganda to sway public opinion. Likewise, abolitionists use publication, speeches, and media to educate the public about the injustices of slavery and to garner support for the movement. Slave narratives and abolitionist literature had a profound impact on public opinion and policy debates regarding slavery. The writing provided first-hand accounts and humanized the institution of slavery. The writings also appealed to the public's moral and emotional compass, creating outrage among the readers. Slave narratives and abolitionist literature sparked debates and discussions about the morality, legality, and economic implications of slavery. These writings played a crucial role in mobilizing support for the abolitionist movement. They inspired individuals to join abolitionist societies, participate in anti-slavery petitions and protest, as well as contribute financially to the cause of emancipation. Over time, as public sentiment shifted against slavery, abolitionist literature helped to influence legislative action. It contributed to the passage of anti-slavery laws in some northern states, as well as provisions like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which intensified the debate over slavery and its expansion into new territories. In Death Note, there is a suspenseful cat and mouse game between Kira, aka Light, and Elle, the detective trying to uncover Kira's identity. Similarly, we have the same sort of cat and mouse game between the abolitionists and those who are trying to capture and sustain the status quo of slavery. Abolitionists engage in strategic and covert operations, such as the Underground Railroad, to evade capture and assist enslaved individuals in the escape to freedom. Which brings us to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery and escaped in 1849. Her own liberation fueled her determination to help others, and she returned to the South numerous times to lead others to freedom. During the Civil War, Tubman served as a Union spy, a scout, and a nurse, contributing to the war. A quote from Harriet Tubman states, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." She used a network of secret routes and safe houses called the Underground Railroad to accomplish this mission. The Underground Railroad was established in the early 19th century and reached its peak during the decades before the Civil War. The Underground Railroad was a decentralized and secretive operation. You had people like Harriet Tubman who were considered conductors that guided escaped slaves, passengers, along these routes, often under the cover of darkness. I don't know if y'all have ever been in actual darkness, when you're driving on the road and you decide to turn off the headlights. Don't ever do this, it's illegal, I think. But if you're driving around and you actually turn off the headlights at night, you can actually see how dark it is. And it's quite terrifying. For those who say that they are not afraid of the dark, try it and you might be afraid. Just saying. The network relied on a system of codes and signals and safe houses, aka stations, that were maintained by abolitionists. Another key figure during this time is one of my favorite abolitionists, John Brown. Brown was a fervent abolitionist who believed in the use of militant tactics to achieve emancipation. He was born 1800 in Connecticut. Brown witnessed the horrors of slavery from a young age and dedicated his life to the cause of liberation. Brown's activism took various forms, including participating in the Underground Railroad. However, it was his involvement in the events of Bleeding Kansas that shot him to national prominence. In response to the escalating violence between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces in Kansas, Brown led a retaliatory raid on the pro-slavery settlement of Pottawatomie Creek in 1856, where several pro-slavery settlers were killed. The Pottawatomie Massacre shocked the nation and ignited controversy, with some hailing Brown as a hero and others condemning him as a dangerous fanatic. Undeterred by the backlash, though, Brown continued to advocate for more militant action against slavery. In 1859, he launched his boldest plan yet, the raid on the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. See, Brown envisioned Harper's Ferry as the starting point for a widespread slave uprising that would lead to the liberation of millions of enslaved individuals. However, the raid quickly unraveled, and Brown and his followers were captured by federal troops led by Colonel Robert E. Lee. Brown was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for treason and murder. He was executed by hanging on December 2nd, 1859. Side note, if you want a good show to follow about John Brown, check out The Good Lord Bird. However, the fight for abolition was met with fierce opposition from defenders of the status quo. Pro-slavery advocates vilified abolitionists, and violent mobs attacked those who dared to speak out against the institution of slavery. Some examples on violent attacks on prominent abolitionist leaders like Elijah Lovejoy and Reverend Charles Turner Torrey. Lovejoy was an abolitionist newspaper editor who was murdered by a pro-slavery mob in 1837 in Alton, Illinois, for his outspoken anti-slavery views. Torrey, a key figure in the Underground Railroad, was arrested multiple times and died in a Maryland prison in 1846 after aiding enslaved individuals in their escape. These attacks were attempts to intimidate and silence abolitionist voices. They highlighted the dangers faced by those who openly opposed slavery. Despite the dangers they faced, abolitionists remained steadfast in their commitment to justice. Death Note explores themes of power and control as Light grapples with the consequences of wielding the Death Note's power. Similarly, the abolitionist movement confronted powerful economic interests, political structures, and social norms that maintain control over enslaved individuals. The abolitionist movement was not confined to well-known figures, and resistance was not always dramatic or overt. Everyday acts of sabotage, feigning illness, breaking tools, and slowing down work were subtle yet powerful ways enslaved individuals resisted their bondage. These acts disrupted the plantation economy and asserted a measure of control over their lives. The abolitionist movement also included countless everyday heroes who organized protests, circulated anti-slavery literature, and sheltered fugitive slaves in their homes. Sometimes the enslaved escaped and lived in hidden communities called maroon communities. Maroon communities were settlements established by escaped enslaved individuals in remote and often inaccessible areas such as mountains, swamps, or dense forests. These communities comprised of escaped slaves and indigenous peoples, and they became symbols of hope and defiance in the fight against slavery. There are a few notable maroon communities, such as the Jamaican Maroons, who successfully resisted British colonial rule for decades, and the Seminole Maroon community, who were a significant group of escaped enslaved Africans who found refuge among the Seminole Native American tribe in Florida. The abolitionist movement reached its culmination with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 and the eventual ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States. As we reflect on the history of African American resistance during slavery, we are reminded of the resilience and strength of those who dared to resist against overwhelming odds. The parallels between Death Note and figures in the abolitionist movement explore complex themes of power, morality, justice, and the enduring struggle against oppression. The legacy of the abolitionist movement lives on in the songs of freedom. Their sacrifices laid the groundwork for future struggles for freedom and equality. Light and his adversaries make sacrifices in pursuit of their ideals. Similarly, abolitionists such as Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass risked their lives and freedoms to achieve the greater goal of abolishing slavery and securing rights for all. Alright, y'all. That's it for this episode. Thank you for joining. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to drop a like and consider following the podcast for more content like this. As always, I welcome your feedback and suggestions for future topics. Until next time, peace.